Look up at the night sky. Every star you see is a giant ball of burning gas. It is so far away that its light takes years, sometimes thousands of years to reach your eyes. That emptiness between the stars and the emptiness just above our clouds is what we call space. Space begins closer than you think. Most scientists mark the edge of space at 100 kilometers above the ground. That line is called the Kármán line. For most of human history, space was a place we could only dream about. Then, in the middle of the 20th century, two countries changed that. The United States and the Soviet Union raced each other to build machines that could escape Earth's gravity. That race was called the space race. It put the first satellite in orbit, the first man in space, and the first human footprints on the moon. For almost 50 years, going to space stayed something only governments could afford. This documentary is about two men who decided that wasn't good enough. One built an online bookstore that became the largest shopping website on Earth. The other built electric cars and an online payment system. This is the story of how their obsession with space turned into the most expensive, most public, and the most bitter rivalry in modern business. It is a story about rockets that exploded, companies that nearly went bankrupt, billion-dollar lawsuits, and two men who've taken shots at each other in public.
You're competing with the likes of Jeff Bezos in Jeff who?
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth.
Jeff Bezos grew up watching the Apollo moon landings as a small child. He has said that the moon landing was one of his first memories. As a teenager, he gave a speech at his high school graduation about his dream, building space hotels and colonies where people could live off Earth. Elon Musk grew up in South Africa, reading science fiction novels and comic books almost obsessively. He has said these books convinced him that humanity should try to become what he calls a multi-planet species, meaning a species that lives on more than one planet, so that if something ever wiped out life on Earth, humanity would still survive somewhere else. Here is something worth remembering. Neither man started out rich. Bezos worked on Wall Street before quitting a stable, well-paid job to start an online bookstore in his garage. That bookstore was Amazon. Musk, on the other hand, co-founded a software company, and he sold a share for over $100 million when PayPal was bought by eBay in 2002. Now both men, when they had that money, made the same unusual decision. Instead of buying yachts or islands, they poured their fortunes into rockets. Neither knew at the time that they were starting a rivalry that would last for decades and eventually decide who controls the access to space itself. In September 2000, Jeff Bezos quietly registered a new company. It wasn't announced with a press conference, there was no big reveal. He simply called it Blue Origin. The company logo was a tortoise. This tells you everything about how Bezos wanted to build rockets, slowly, carefully, testing every part again and again before risking the real flight. Blue Origin's first project was a small rocket called New Shepard, named after Alan Shepard, the first American to fly in space. New Shepard wasn't designed to orbit the Earth. It was designed to go straight up past the edge of space, let its passengers experience a few minutes of weightlessness and see the curve of the Earth, and then come straight back down. This kind of flight is called suborbital. Bezos funded Blue Origin quietly for years, selling roughly $1 billion of his Amazon stock every year to keep it running. This patience became Blue Origin's biggest strength, and later in this story, its biggest weakness. 2 years after Bezos started Blue Origin, Elon Musk started his own rocket company. He called it Space Exploration Technologies, shortened to SpaceX. Musk's approach was complete opposite to Bezos. SpaceX was fast and loud in public. Musk's plan was simple on paper. Build rockets cheaper than anyone else, launch them, watch them fail, fix the problem and launch them again. SpaceX's first rocket was Falcon 1. It was small, but it needed to prove that a private company with no government backing could actually reach orbit. Reaching orbit is very different from a quick suborbital hop. To orbit the Earth, the rocket doesn't just need to go up, It needs to go sideways at about 28,000 kilometers per hour. Falcon 1's first 3 launches, all of them failed. The first rocket fell into the ocean less than a minute after liftoff because a corroded fuel line leaked. The second one reached space, but couldn't reach the orbit. The third failed when first and second parts of the rocket, called stages, crashed into each other while separating. By the third failure in August 2008, SpaceX had almost no money left. Musk had already put most of his wealth into the company. If the fourth launch failed too, SpaceX would very likely have to shut completely down. But on September 28, 2008, Falcon 1 launched for the fourth time. This time, everything worked. It became the first privately built rocket using liquid fuel to ever reach orbit around Earth. A few weeks later, NASA rewarded SpaceX with a contract worth $1.6 billion to deliver cargo to the International Space Station. That contract saved the company. This is the moment the rivalry actually began. Bezos had been quietly building for 8 years with nobody watching, but Musk had just proven loudly and publicly that a small private company could do what only nations had done before. To understand the next part of this rivalry, you need to understand one idea: reusable rockets. For 60 years, every rocket ever launched was thrown away after one use. Imagine buying a brand new airplane, flying it from one city to another exactly once, and then dumping it. That is exactly how every space launch worked. And it's a huge reason why space travel is so expensive. Building a rocket costs tens of millions of dollars. And almost all of that is lost on every single flight. Both Bezos and Musk became obsessed with the same solution: build a rocket that can fly back itself down after launch. Blue Origin got there first, but only partway. In November 2015, its small suborbital rocket New Shepard launched past the edge of space and then landed back safely. Bezos celebrated the achievement publicly, at one point posting online about the club of rockets that fly to space and back. 1 month later, in December 2015, SpaceX did something much harder. Its Falcon 9 rocket, a full-sized orbital rocket carrying real satellites, launched, delivered its payload to orbit, and then landed its first stage back to the launch site. This was a much bigger technical achievement because Falcon 9 flies higher and much faster than New Shepard, meaning its returning stage has to survive more heat and stress on the way down. Musk argued that landing a rocket that had actually reached orbit was a very different achievement from landing one that had just gone straight up and back. Bezos didn't let the comment go unanswered, replying online and welcoming SpaceX to the club anyway. It's worth pausing here, because this argument about who landed first can sound like two rich men fighting over bragging rights. It wasn't really about bragging, it was about proving a business model. If reusable rockets work reliably, whoever mastered them first would be able to launch satellites, cargo, and eventually people for a fraction of what anyone else could charge. That company wouldn't just win contracts, it would set the price for the entire space industry for years to come. SpaceX pushed this advantage hard. Falcon 9 kept landing over and over, turning what was once a jaw-dropping achievement into something almost routine. SpaceX began reflying the same rocket boosters again and again, some boosters flying more than 20 times. Blue Origin, by contrast, kept New Shepard flying suborbital hops for years. They were refining it but not building anything that could compete for the big money contracts. That gap between the two companies would define the next decade of their rivalry. By the early 2020s, both companies were chasing the same prize: NASA's Artemis program, a plan to send astronauts back to the moon for the first time since 1972. Whoever built the lunar lander would win one of the most prestigious and valuable contracts in space history. In April 2021, NASA picked SpaceX, awarding the company a contract worth about $2.9 billion to build a moon lander. Blue Origin, on the other hand, was not happy with NASA picking SpaceX. Within a few days, they filed a formal protest with the US government, arguing the selection process had been unfair, and when that protest failed, Blue Origin sued NASA in the federal court. This froze the entire moon lander program that SpaceX was supposed to work on. The lawsuit was eventually dismissed, but the delay cost time that the entire Artemis program could not easily get back. This is the moment the rivalry stopped being about who lands rockets more gracefully and became a real fight over billions of taxpayer dollars and the timeline for returning humans to the moon. NASA later added a second moon lander contract, partly to avoid depending on a single company again, and this time, Blue Origin won a share of it. But the message from the first fight was clear: This was no longer a friendly competition between two space enthusiasts. It was two of most powerful companies on Earth fighting in court over who gets to build America's ride to the moon. By the mid-2020s, both companies had moved on from small rockets to genuinely enormous ones. SpaceX built Starship, the largest and most powerful rocket ever constructed. Unlike Falcon 9, which only reuses its bottom half, Starship is designed to be fully reusable. Blue Origin built New Glenn. Unlike New Shepard, New Glenn is a true orbital rocket. New Glenn had its first successful launch in Jan 2025, more than a decade after Blue Origin first announced it. Moving carefully is good, but Blue Origin's critics argued that the company had moved so carefully that SpaceX had lapped it several times over. Both rockets have suffered dramatic test failures along the way, including Starship's prototype that have exploded during test flights. In this industry, that isn't always a sign of failure. Both companies have argued publicly that blowing up a rocket during a test is how you learn what needs fixing before a rocket ever carries a human. It's easy to watch this rivalry as pure entertainment. Two billionaires with expensive toys taking shots at each other online. But underneath the jokes, there is something much bigger at stake. Whoever controls cheap, reliable access to space controls the next stage of the internet. Musk's company operates Starlink, a network of thousands of small satellites in low orbit that beam internet access to even remote parts of the world. Bezos' company Amazon is building a competing network called Kuiper, aiming to do the same thing. Both the projects need constant cheap rocket launches to keep replacing and expanding their satellites, which is exactly why both men needed their own rocket companies in the first place. And beyond satellites, there is the moon, where multiple countries and companies now plan permanent bases, partly for scientific research and partly because moon holds resources, including water ice that could be turned into rocket fuel for deeper missions. And beyond the moon, there is Musk's ultimate goal, a self-sustaining human settlement on Mars, an idea he has repeated for over 20 years as the true reason he started SpaceX in the first place. If you're keeping score right now, SpaceX is clearly ahead. It launches far more often than Blue Origin. Its Falcon 9 boosters are reflown routinely, it holds NASA's primary moon lander contract, and Starship is moving towards becoming the largest working rocket in history. But space, you see, is a long game. Being early doesn't guarantee winning permanently. Just ask the Soviet Union, which almost won every stage of the space race, except the one that mattered, putting the first human footprints on the moon. What makes this rivalry worth telling is not who really wins. It's that two men, each convinced their vision for the future is the right one, took their fortunes and their egos and pointed them at the same impossible target: getting humanity off this one planet. Whether either of them succeeds, the race itself has already done something no governments managed to do in 50 years. And more importantly, it has made us all feel space is close to us again.